Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named From Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a shot of a strange town where the sheriff Boyd walks around with a bell as evening approaches, reminding residents outside to hurry home. Customers in the restaurant, even if they haven't finished their meal, are hurried out by the staff because they're about to close. Everyone seems accustomed to staying indoors at night, tightly closing their doors and hanging charms on their windows. A man, having drunk too much at the tavern, doesn't return home yet, and his family anxiously waits for him. With nightfall approaching, they have no choice but to close their doors and shut all windows. As the wife checks downstairs for any oversights, their little girl, alone on the second floor, suddenly hears her grandma calling her from outside the window. Without hesitation, the girl opens the window, and her grandma smiles, saying she missed her so much. By the time her mother arrives upstairs, it's already too late. The next morning, the drunken man stumbles out of the tavern and returns home to find many neighbors gathered at his door. Boyd storms out of his house, cursing him as an irresponsible father. He then drags him upstairs where they find the gruesome sight of his daughter's lifeless body. The drunken father collapses in despair, sobbing uncontrollably. This is his misfortune and the town's nightmare. Boyd leaves the room, spots a fallen charm at the door, sighs, and pockets it. He then heads to the colony housing on the edge of town, the shared home to many homeless residents, including his son, Ellis. The father and son seem to have some unresolved issues, and an awkward atmosphere fills the air. Boyd invites his son to the funeral of the previous night's victim, but Ellis resists, claiming he's busy and doesn't want to go. The scene shifts to a man named Jim, who is driving an RV with his family to a lake for a vacation. They were initially excited about their upcoming journey, but their enthusiasm wanes when they encounter a fallen tree blocking their path. Jim and his family exit the vehicle to inspect the tree, but they are unable to move it. Suddenly, a crow lands on a nearby branch, followed by more crows gathering and circling above their heads. Jim's wife, Tabitha, grows increasingly uneasy and urges her husband to leave. Jim looks at the crows with confusion. He starts the vehicle, intending to find a detour to the lake, but the location is so remote that their phones have no signal. They have no choice but to continue on another road, eventually arriving at the eerie town. Abandoned, wrecked cars can be seen everywhere along the roadside, seemingly foreshadowing something ominous. The townspeople attending the funeral soon notice the two unfamiliar RVs and all stare in their direction. As they see the strangers stop their vehicle, Boyd mutters under his breath, instructing everyone not to speak out of turn, as usual. Jim gets out of the car, intending to ask the residents for directions, but they all avoid him for unknown reasons. Only Boyd approaches Jim to strike up a conversation, telling him that if he follows the road straight ahead, he will reach the highway. Jim finds the people in this town very strange and just wants to leave as soon as possible. The family drives on the only road through the eerie town, intending to cut straight across and get back on the highway. However, after driving for a while, they find themselves back in the town. Confused, Jim stops the car to ask for directions, but the townspeople walk away without saying a word. He has no choice but to continue driving forward. His wife suggests that they might have taken a wrong turn, so Jim becomes extra careful, constantly looking around. This time he is sure that the car is driving straight, but they still end up back in the town. Jim quickly turns the RV around to see if they can retrace their steps. Boyd, seemingly anticipating this, instructs his deputy, Kenny, to prepare their weapons. All the while, Tabitha insists that it's impossible and that he must have missed a turn. Suddenly, a car approaches from the opposite direction. Jim swerves to avoid it, and the RV veers off the road. After a while, Jim slowly regains consciousness. He is trapped by a tree branch and unable to move. He calls out his family members one by one, and only his daughter Julie responds. Jim starts to panic, praying that help will arrive soon. The situation in the other vehicle involved in the accident is slightly better. The injured driver gets out of the car and slowly walks forward. At this moment, Boyd and his deputy are setting up a spike strip. They have always used this method to put an end to the nightmare of out-of-town vehicles circling their town non-stop. When they see the injured driver approaching them, they realize there has been an accident. Boyd sends Kenny to take the injured person to the town's clinic while he runs towards the accident site. First, he sees the wrecked car and discovers another passenger inside. Considering the passenger's dazed appearance, Boyd concludes they must be on drugs. He handcuffs the injured person to the car, waiting for backup. Then he goes to the RV, assesses the condition of Jim's family, and climbs inside to help them out first. On the other side, Kenny took the injured person to the clinic and then drove to pick up the doctor, preparing to head to the accident site for reinforcements. On the way, they happened to run into Boyd's son, Ellis. They told Ellis that his father was rescuing people in the woods and needed help urgently. At first, Ellis was reluctant to go, but Kenny reminded him that it was getting dark, so he hastily got into the pickup truck. The group quickly arrived at the scene, first providing basic treatment for the injured man, and then swiftly went to the RV. By this time, Jim's wife and daughter had been rescued, and fortunately, they were mostly unharmed, just a bit weak from the shock. But their son, Ethan, had been pierced by a table leg in his thigh. It would be impossible to transport him back to town in the short term. Spending the night in the woods would be as good as a death sentence. Boyd decided to take Jim and his family back to town, but Jim insisted he wouldn't leave his son behind. Boyd eventually compromised, allowing Jim to stay with his son while his weak wife and daughter had to go back with Kenny. After the others left, Boyd looked uneasily at the darkening sky. Fortunately, he had a protective charm he had found in a drunkard's house earlier that day. Carefully, he hung it on the RV's window. Jim looked at him, puzzled, and Boyd explained that it was for the RV's protection. Meanwhile, Kenny and Jim's family were on their way back to town. However, Kenny had forgotten about the spike strip he and Boyd had set up earlier that morning. With the sky already dark, they had no choice but to run towards a nearby colony house. Boyd, inside the RV, closed all doors and windows, anxiously looking outside. Gradually, several shadowy figures emerged from the depths of the woods, slowly approaching the RV like ghosts. Then, a knocking sound came from the door. Jim thought help had arrived and wanted to open the door, but Boyd held him tightly, yelling that they weren't human. If they opened the door, they would all be doomed. When the knocking stopped, Boyd finally let go of Jim, who stood there, stunned, not knowing what had just happened. On the other side, Kenny was leading Jim's family in a desperate run towards the colony house. The injured man named Jade accidentally fell to the ground, and Kenny had to help him along the way. They finally arrived at the front door, only to find it locked. The residents inside were also extremely nervous, and not opening the door at night was a deep-rooted warning for them. Ellis's girlfriend wanted to force the door open, but a burly man with a gun stopped her. Just in time, the house owner, Donna, appeared, shouting that they couldn't stand by and watch people die. At that moment, the people outside noticed several strange individuals approaching from around the corner. Julie recognized one of them as her boyfriend and wanted to approach him, but Kenny quickly pulled her back. Luckily, the door to the house opened just in time, and everyone rushed inside to safety. Donna noticed several unfamiliar faces in the crowd and yelled for them to get down on the ground. Jade fainted, while Julie and her mother were tied up by the others. Clearly, their crisis was far from over. In a separate room, Donna made sure that Jim's wife, Tabitha, had calmed down before untying her. She explained that this was a process every newcomer had to go through when arriving at the colony house. Then she began to tell Tabitha about the strange occurrences in the town, asking if she believed in the existence of the devil. Meanwhile, inside the RV, Jim was also curious about what those things outside were. Although they were no longer knocking on the door, it was evident that they were still lurking nearby. The doctor's emotions began to flare up, and she wanted to check if the charm was secure. Boyd quickly stopped her, warning her not to be fooled into doing anything foolish. It took some effort for the doctor to calm down, and Boyd advised her to focus all her energy on the child, ignoring everything else. This tactic seemed to work, and the creatures outside eventually left. The doctor began to remove the table leg from the child's body. Back at the colony house, Donna started recounting her own experiences. 3 years ago, she and her sister had encountered a fallen tree blocking the road. What was worse than Jim's family situation was that, by the time they reached the town, it was already dark. Donna watched helplessly as her sister was tortured to death by the devil in a brutal manner. She survived by hiding amidst the bushes, and later cleared out the colony house to provide shelter for other outsiders like herself, who were stranded in the town with nowhere to go. As for the origin of the devil, even the town's priest could not explain. However, as long as they kept doors and windows tightly closed at night and hung the charm by the window, the devil could not harm anyone. After the story, Tabitha had a hard time accepting its truth, but her subsequent experiences would change her perspective. In this eerie town of utter despair, where once you enter, there's no getting out, humans must stay indoors with doors and windows locked, or the devil will come to brutally slaughter people. With the help of the town's residents, Jim and his family managed to survive their first night after the car accident. The doctor also treated the injuries of their son, Ethan. The next morning, the family of 4 finally reunited, hugging each other tightly. It was clear that the previous night's experiences had brought them close to the brink of life and death. Afterward, Jim's family was temporarily placed in the colony house. Ethan caught a glimpse of a smiling boy outside the window, signaling that their nightmare had just begun. Moreover, the town was not only home to the terrifying devil. Kenny, who had escorted Tabitha and her daughter to the colony house the night before, did not return to the clinic to accompany his father, who suffered from dementia. When he arrived the next day, he found the clinic's door wide open, the charm on the ground. As expected, the clinic was in complete disarray, with the nurse and Kenny's father both gruesomely killed in the room. Kenny held his deceased father, weeping in agony. Rewinding to one day earlier, after Kenny sent the injured driver from the car accident back to the clinic, he hurried off to rescue Jim's family. The only nurse who had to look after Kenny's father asked the waitress Sarah from the town's restaurant to help care for the patients. Little did they know that this seemingly innocent girl was actually a psychotic killer. Without any reason, she killed the driver, and afterward she appeared genuinely remorseful. She confessed everything to her brother, but to cover up the murder, she did something even more horrifying. After the nurse had settled Kenny's father, she found the clinic's door wide open and the smiling devil walking in. Now, the mastermind, Sarah, was at home, constantly confessing to her brother that she shouldn't have killed the driver or opened the clinic's door. Heartbroken, Kenny ran into the woods to make a chessboard, his father's favorite, as a tribute. Boyd tried to console him, but Kenny was consumed by resentment. He noticed that the devils always seemed calm before they killed, as they knew that people had very limited places to go. Clearly, Kenny began to harbor thoughts of resisting the devil. His words deeply moved Boyd, whose wife had also met a tragic end at the hands of the devil. On the other side, Jim's family had to sleep on the floor in the colony house. The living conditions were indeed incomparable to what they had before, but Jim was optimistic, always able to play and have fun with his son. However, Julie seemed to reject the atmosphere at home, preferring to get along well with the people in the colony house instead. Jade, the man who had been injured in the car accident, finally woke up. As usual, Donna told him about the terrifying aspects of the town, the inability to escape, and the murderous monsters that appeared at night. After hearing Donna's story, Jade thought it must be an elaborate prank orchestrated by his traveling companions and the travel company. He believed it was a real-life escape room. Donna was speechless as she watched Jade, who enthusiastically shouted about finding clues and completing the mission to escape the town. To him, everyone in the town was a character in his own story, and he could do whatever he wanted. However, the restaurant owner, Kenny's mother, wouldn't indulge him. Even Sarah, the psychopathic killer working at the restaurant, couldn't understand the comical man in front of her. That afternoon, the priest sought out Jim's family, saying that newcomers to the town had to participate in a selection ceremony. They had to decide whether to live in the colony house or in the town itself, as once they made a choice, they couldn't change their minds. The priest intended to take them for a walk around the town, explaining the rules as they went. In the evenings, they had to stay indoors, hang up amulets, and lock their doors and windows. Tabitha couldn't understand why the residents could act as if nothing had happened despite the terrifying events in the town. The priest said that given enough time, humans could accept any irrational existence and even consider it a part of life. Tabitha then noticed an iron shed and asked its purpose. The priest explained that it was used to punish criminals who had violated the rules and caused the death of townspeople. The offender would be made to stay inside the shed without an amulet for one night. Tabitha asked how many times the iron shed had been used, and the priest said that tonight would be the first time, with the drunkard in the police station being the one to be punished. Because he was drunk and didn't go home the night before, his wife and child were tragically killed by the devil. His actions violated Boyd's rule of spending the night at home, and thus he had to face this punishment. At that moment, the drunkard was full of regret. He hadn't always been like this. Boyd knew that the punished drunkard wouldn't survive the night, so he asked if there were any unfulfilled wishes he had. The drunkard requested to visit a place where he and his deceased daughter used to swing, hoping Boyd would bury him with his wife and daughter. Meanwhile, the house vacated by the drunkard could potentially become Jim's family's new residence. After the priest introduced them to the events that had taken place 2 nights prior, Tabitha still struggled to accept it. She wasn't repulsed by the bloodstains throughout the house, but rather she was disgusted by the town's rules and methods. She wondered why no one blamed the real culprits, instead of subjecting the house's owner to the same fate as his wife and daughter. She thought the townspeople's thinking was absurd. Having experienced the horrors of the devil up close in the trailer the night before, Jim believed that their only option was to adapt to this place. Otherwise, they'd end up like the drunkard's family. After hearing this, Tabitha reluctantly agreed. Boyd also sensed the decay of the town. He went to the church to find the priest, expressing that he couldn't bring himself to lock the drunkard inside the iron shed. Unexpectedly, the priest scolded Boyd, saying that the rules were set by him to deter other residents. If the drunkard wasn't punished, more people would break the rules. Boyd was furious, saying that they shouldn't just watch as a man who had just lost his wife and child was to be killed by the devil. The priest replied that for the sake of the town's safety, Boyd had no choice. Disappointed, Boyd sighed and walked away. He went to the shed to experience the feeling of sitting inside. The small, confined space nearly suffocated him, and he finally made up his mind. He ran to the police station, gave the drunkard an amulet, and told him about a small cabin in the forest where he could lay low. Soon, the selection ceremony for Jim's family began. This was the most important event in the town, presided over by the highly respected priest. Newcomers had to choose between living in the town, following the rules, and living a structured life, or living in the relatively relaxed colony house. Boyd stepped forward, saying that there was room for adjustment regarding the rules of the iron shed, implying that he wanted to pardon the drunkard's punishment. But just then, the drunkard appeared before everyone, holding the amulet. Instead of fleeing to the forest as Boyd had suggested, he came to make a heartfelt confession. Every Christmas, he used to buy gifts for his daughter, but everything changed after they moved to the town. Now, all he wanted was to see his wife and child again. After returning the amulet to Boyd, the drunkard said that he was willing to accept his punishment. Suddenly, laughter disrupted the scene. It was the comical Jade who thought the drama arranged for him was simply brilliant and that the travel company had gone all out. Boyd, somewhat speechless, carried Jade and made him choose. Without much thought, Jade picked up a stone representing the town. Boyd then threw him out of the ceremony. Next, it was Jim's family's turn to choose. Boyd asked each of them for their choice. Jim, Tabitha, and their son Ethan chose to live in the town, while their daughter Julie chose the colony house. Tabitha hurriedly said that she had made a mistake, but Julie insisted that she hadn't. Donna cheered for Julie, and the scene immediately became chaotic. Boyd shouted to regain control and began to console Jim and Tabitha. He told them that he lived in the town, but his son Ellis lived in the colony house, and he would help look after Julie. The priest seized the opportunity to finalize the decision as the sun was about to set. The selection ceremony was completed, and everyone hurried home. Not far away, Kenny wanted to make Jade realize the situation. He told Jade that his driver friend had been killed by the demon the night before. Jade wondered if this was some sort of branching storyline, but his doubts were shattered when Kenny took him to see his friend's lifeless body. Jade was devastated. As evening approached, all the townspeople gathered near the iron shed. Boyd opened the door, and with everyone watching, the drunkard slowly walked into the shed. After locking the door, Boyd left without even looking at the priest beside him. Night was about to fall, and the restaurant closed on schedule. Jim, Tabitha, and Ethan moved into their new home in the town. He didn't forget the town's rules, and he locked the doors and windows and hung up the amulets. Meanwhile, a party was being held in the colony house to celebrate the arrival of their newest member, Julie. The colony house was more lively than the town, and perhaps Julie's choice wasn't wrong after all. In the town's houses, Boyd couldn't help but peek out, wanting to check on the drunkard's condition in the iron shed. The scene in the colony house was a stark contrast to the drunkard in the confined space. Soon there was a commotion outside, and the drunkard looked out to find the vicious demon approaching. The accumulated fear over the years made the man tremble as he desperately awaited his doom. It was a hopeless situation for this man, all because he got drunk and didn't return home all night, leaving his wife and child vulnerable. They failed to lock their doors and windows, allowing the demon to break in and brutally kill them. According to the town's rules, the man was to be locked in the iron shed for one night, which means exactly a sacrifice made to the devil. Early the next morning, the town's sheriff arrived near the iron shed with a cart. Taking a deep breath, he loaded the pieces of the mutilated body onto the cart. After covering the remains with a tarp, Boyd pulled the cart towards the church. Jim and his family gradually began to accept their new life in the town. They spent their first night in a town residence house, which was an incredibly agonizing night for Tabitha. Although no demon visited them, she couldn't sleep at all. She knew that the house they were staying in used to belong to the recently deceased drunkard and his family. Tabitha knew that she could never truly fit into this town. At this time, their son Ethan came over and said he was hungry. According to the town's rules, they could dine for free at the local restaurant. As they left their house, they ran into Boyd. Ethan asked what was inside the cart. Boyd replied that it was just some supplies and reminded them to hurry if they wanted breakfast, as it was only available during specific times. The restaurant was already packed with people. However, as newcomers, Jim and his son were given reserved seats by the restaurant owner. The strange woman, Sarah, didn't show any signs of distress and enthusiastically served the father and son. Ethan said he wanted to eat pancakes, which was considered quite a luxury for the townspeople. Sarah didn't dare to agree on the spot, saying she would have to ask the kitchen first. Boyd took the body to the church, instructing the priest to bury the drunkard and his family together, as it was his last wish. Boyd couldn't forgive the priest for insisting on punishing the drunkard. Sensing this, the priest approached Boyd, who was fixing the iron shed, trying to bridge the gap between them. The priest knew the importance of Boyd to the town. It was Boyd who discovered the talisman and maintained the town's safety, allowing the residents to return to a normal life. However, Boyd seemed to have paid a heavy price. His wife likely died as a result. The restaurant owner carefully prepared delicious pancakes for Ethan. The little boy looked satisfied and asked his father if they were going to stay here forever. Jim replied that they were only staying temporarily and would definitely leave later. Although he appeared relaxed, he soon couldn't hold back his tears anymore. Excusing himself to the restroom, Jim began to sob, overwhelmed by the recent events and his worries for the future. Meanwhile, as Ethan enjoyed his pancakes, he met a strange friend named Victor, who lived in the colony house. Victor was said to be one of the earliest people trapped in the town. He was a solitary man, often locking himself in his room and drawing peculiar pictures. One day, he noticed that the forest seemed to be getting closer to the colony house. Just as he tried to measure the distance with his footsteps, he happened to meet Ethan, who was taking a walk. Ethan asked him if he had seen a boy in white clothes. Victor was surprised and was about to say something when Ethan's sister appeared, interrupting their conversation. Victor came to find Ethan this time to ask if the boy in white he mentioned looked like the one in his drawing. After looking at the drawing, Ethan nodded. Victor's face turned grim. At this moment, Jim walked out of the restroom and saw the eerie drawing of the boy in Victor's hands. Thinking that Victor might harm his son, Jim angrily threw him out of the restaurant. Ethan was upset, feeling that his father had hurt his friend. When they got home, he refused to talk to his father. Meanwhile, another newcomer, Jade, was now deep in thought. But he believed he could leave the strange town. He took Kenny into an underground storage room because he had seen a strange symbol on the ceiling and a corpse in a cabinet while searching for treasure the day before. But today, everything had changed. He believed this was an important clue to leave the town, but Kenny thought it was just a hallucination due to his tension in this new environment. Many newcomers had the same reaction, but Jade insisted that he could tell the difference between reality and illusion. After all, he used to be the boss of a software company. Kenny, failing to persuade him, decided to show him something. In the police station, Kenny pointed to a map and said that the people in the town came from all over the country. They seemed to be teleported and gathered here mysteriously. Now, no matter what happened, he wouldn't be surprised. Jade suddenly laughed, saying that someone must be behind all this and he would find the answer. Kenny said many people were like him at first, but they ended up going crazy or dying. Those who survived chose to accept everything irrational. Suddenly, a walkie-talkie nearby rang. Kenny said this happened often. Jade quickly moved the walkie-talkie away, thinking it might provide a clue. Jim's daughter, Julie, had just woken up on the living room sofa. She saw a strange man sitting in front of her and learned that he was drawing her portrait. However, she still felt uneasy. Then another guest came to greet her and, without asking, put on Julie's shirt. Julie didn't say anything but was obviously unhappy. She now regretted leaving her parents to live here alone. Fortunately, there were still some normal people, such as Ellis's girlfriend, Fatima. After hearing about Julie's morning ordeal, the girl took her to the colony house laundry area and said that she could help out there to retrieve her clothes and choose from some unclaimed ones. At this time, Julie's mother, Tabitha, appeared to deliver a sweater and tried to persuade her daughter to move back to the town with her. This upset Julie, who pointed out her parents were getting divorced. It turned out that the road trip was a pre-divorce journey agreed upon by Jim and Tabitha, but Julie had found out. The mother and daughter's conversation ended on a sour note. Later, Tabitha happened to meet Jim in the yard, who was also not on good terms with their son. As a result, the two found an outlet for their frustrations and started arguing again, not noticing the strange man. Victor came to see Ethan again, wanting to take him to find the boy in white. He also picked up a wooden stick to replace his cane, saying it was better for adventuring. And so the two entered the forest from the backyard. Victor had been living in the area for many years and was very familiar with the surroundings. They quickly discovered the fleeting figure of the boy in white, deep in the forest. Victor brought Ethan to the tree hollow where the boy had disappeared, seemingly knowing many secrets. Victor drew a smiley face on a stone and threw it into the hollow. Not long after, the stone fell from the sky, the very same one that had been thrown into the hollow. Victor said that humans could be teleported by magical forces too, but the destination was uncertain and could be far away. Suddenly, there was a noise from the tree hollow. Victor sensed something was wrong and decided to take Ethan away from there. Back in town, Jim and Tabitha returned home after their argument and noticed that their son was missing and that his cane was left in the backyard. This suggested that he might have gone into the forest, so the couple rushed to look for him. They reached the depths of the woods and suddenly encountered a bad-tempered dog barking. Strangely, despite not being far apart, they couldn't see each other, as if it's a space-time dislocation. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Victor appeared and scared the dog away with a shot. Although Jim saw his wife and son, he was still furious, convinced that Victor had brought Ethan there. Seeing this, Victor was frightened and fled. When he returned home, he rummaged through his things and found a drawing of a dog, identical to the one in the forest. Victor suddenly remembered his own childhood when he first came to the small town and saw the boy in white walking with a dog among the corpses in the town. He wasn't scared and even greeted the boy. Now it seemed that every drawing Victor made had actually happened. Upon returning home, Jim immediately sought Boyd and told him that Victor might have harmed his son. However, Boyd replied that Victor was part of the colony house and he had no authority to intervene. He could only negotiate with Donna, the person in charge of the colony house. Feeling guilty, Boyd invited Jim's family to dinner as a formal welcome. He even dressed up for the occasion. Once again, the radio suddenly turned on by itself. Boyd was no longer surprised by this. At that moment, the waitress Sarah suddenly felt an unbearable pain in her arm, followed by veins surfacing one by one, forming the words, "Kill the boy." Not long after, the text disappeared, but Sarah's ordeal didn't end. She suddenly fell to the ground and started convulsing violently. With the help of Fatima, Julie finally got her own independent space. She was working hard to adapt to the environment here and wanted to blend in. However, some people still knew that this place was not suitable for living and were trying their best to escape. Victor, who knew more about the truth, was digging something at the moment, and everyone in the colony house was looking at him in confusion. Donna ran over and asked him what he was doing. Victor replied that he just wanted to be prepared this time, feeling as if he was digging his own grave. He probably sensed that disaster was about to befall the town. After Sarah's convulsion, her brother seemed to guess something and quickly ran towards the clinic. However, Sarah had already improved by then. The town's only doctor didn't find anything wrong, but still asked her to stay in the clinic for observation overnight. Strangely, Sarah repeatedly emphasized that she didn't want to see her brother. At this time, the town's sheriff also walked in, wanting to find out why Sarah suddenly had a seizure. 6 months ago, similar cases had occurred in the town, and he was very concerned, wondering if it was caused by the town's environment. However, the doctor reassured Boyd that there was no such possibility. What they needed to focus on now was how to persuade Sarah's brother to leave so that the patient could rest. Boyd took on this task and stopped the brother at the hospital entrance, saying that Sarah was already resting and asked him to come back tomorrow morning. Seeing that he insisted on going in, Boyd asked if they were hiding something from him. Unexpectedly, this casual remark made the brother nervous, and he left after a few stammering words. In fact, Sarah had indeed done something terrible, so it was no wonder the brother was so nervous. She had once killed the injured driver lying in the clinic with her own hands. In order to cover up her crime, she opened the clinic's door to let the demon in, which ultimately led to the tragic death of the clinic's nurse and Kenny's father. Although the brother didn't participate, he helped keep the secret for his sister. However, today's strange occurrence made the brother worry that his sister might kill again. Inside the clinic, Sarah looked at the scalpel in front of her and hesitated once more. She believed that the words showing up on her hand were a revelation from the gods. As long as she did as instructed, everyone in the town could leave this cursed place. Presumably, the previous murder also had the same purpose. However, this time the target was a child. Sarah found herself in a dilemma. She asked the doctor if she would do something terrible if it meant everyone could leave the town. After some thought, the doctor felt that she could do it since everyone would benefit. These words finally helped Sarah make her choice. The next day, Sarah had spent a peaceful night at the clinic. As she stepped outside, she ran into her brother, who was anxiously waiting for her. He was worried that his sister might do the same thing again, but Sarah refused to reveal anything. This made her brother even more worried. Meanwhile, the family of Ethan, who was oblivious to the impending disaster, was also contemplating how to leave the town. The clueless father, Jim, decided to try everything to figure the answer out. In no time, they had filled a wall with various questions. Jim believed that if they found all the answers, they would definitely be able to leave. However, Tabitha disagreed. The other people in the town had pondered over the same questions, and they were still trapped there. In fact, there was another question that everyone had overlooked. Jim asked her to write it down, but Tabitha shook her head, saying she didn't dare write it down and didn't want to know the answer. At this point, Sarah had already taken a scalpel and arrived alone at Ethan's house. After meeting his parents, she said that she had hit it off with Ethan and wanted to take him out to play. The little boy didn't have many friends here and was naturally overjoyed. However, Sarah realized that this wasn't a good place to carry out her plan. She then suggested taking Ethan to her brother's farm to see the goats. Tabitha wanted to come along, but Sarah immediately said that she could take him alone. Tabitha, however, insisted on accompanying them. Meanwhile, Sarah's brother wanted to find the priest to confess and relieve his stress. When he discovered that the priest wasn't at the church, he searched the town and finally found the priest deep in thought in the wilderness. He told the priest that he had something terrible to confess and asked if he could ensure that the secret would be kept forever. The priest said that only the two of them and God would know. However, when he learned about Sarah's devilish deeds, he was completely taken aback. The priest told her brother that keeping a secret was one thing, but Sarah could pose a threat to the safety of other people in the town. They had to find her immediately. So the two searched the town and finally learned at the restaurant that she had gone to the ranch with Ethan and his mother. Sarah and the others had already been at the ranch for quite some time. As expected, there were many small animals there, and Ethan was having a great time. Sarah told Tabitha that the town had several emergency shelters in case someone got stranded outside at night, and there was one at the ranch that she wanted to show her. Without any suspicion, Tabitha followed Sarah into a warehouse, which had a separate room inside. As Tabitha was looking around at the entrance, she was suddenly pushed in with great force. Sarah locked the door from the outside, saying it was all for everyone's sake. Then she took out a scalpel and silently approached Ethan, feeling guilty about what she was about to do. However, she believed it was the only way for everyone to escape the town. Just as Sarah was about to act, her brother arrived in time and tried to persuade her to stop. Ethan seized the opportunity to run away when Sarah was distracted. Her brother held on to Sarah, but in the next moment, the knife accidentally injured him. Sarah never expected this to happen and crouched on the ground, crying. The priest, who had just arrived, looked at the scene in shock. Soon the townspeople gathered, having heard the news. Jim heard his wife's cry for help from inside the warehouse and rushed to open the door. Tabitha frantically searched for her son. Little did she know that Ethan had run to the nearby colony house and found his sister Julie, who was playing outside. The doctor confirmed by the side of Sarah's brother's body that there was no way to save him from his injuries. The priest shook his head, and it turned out that Sarah had run into the woods. This made Jim's family even angrier, fearing that their son Ethan might be in danger again. Boyd assured them that he would handle Sarah if she returned before dark, and if she didn't, it meant she was already dead. The conversation only made Jim angrier. He felt that there were too many monsters in the town, which further strengthened his family's desire to escape. Tabitha picked up a pen and wrote down the question she had been afraid to ask, that if they really did survive the car accident. The implication was that the people in the town might not actually be alive in this world. The desire to leave the town wasn't limited to Jim's family. Jade was also looking for answers. He had an even bigger idea, planning to explore the situation from the perspective of relativity and parallel universes. Unfortunately, he didn't make any progress after thinking for a long time. Later, he accidentally walked into a room with an old walkie-talkie in hand and was astounded by the scene inside. He wondered why there was really a bar in this rundown place. The bar owner said that what the people here needed most was alcohol, so he opened a bar. Jade curiously picked up a glass of alcohol and took a sip, but immediately spat it out. Due to limited resources, the owner had no choice but to use the cheapest potatoes to make the alcohol. As a result, Jade despised the place even more, believing that those who came here to drink were like rats in a maze, only seeking temporary satisfaction. He scolded the people, asking if they had ever considered finding a way out, but no one paid any attention to him. The bar owner stopped Jade, saying that he would become like them in time, but Jade's desire to leave was strong. He had just acquired a technology company outside and hadn't even had the chance to make money from it yet. The bar owner then told Jade that they were like Schrodinger's cat, trapped in a box. Before the box was opened, people outside wouldn't know whether they were dead or alive. He suggested that if Jade could fix the walkie-talkie and let people outside know they were alive, everyone would surely be saved. This idea greatly inspired Jade, who never thought the answer could be so simple. Boyd was also thinking about how to escape the town, not only for himself, but also to fulfill his late wife's last wish. He took some time off with his deputy and went to his wife's tombstone to pour out his worries. The recent string of deaths in the town made him feel that there wasn't much time left for everyone. Perhaps soon, the town would face a devastating blow. At this point, he had an idea for a way to escape the town, but the risk was too great, and it could lead to the doom of the town and everyone's death. Boyd was now hesitating, unsure whether to proceed. His wife used to make decisions for him when he was confused, and now he still yearned for a sign. While searching for a sign, he happened to encounter the guilt-ridden doctor, who felt that her conversation the night before had led Sarah to harm Ethan. Boyd kept reassuring her that it wasn't her fault, reminding her that she had saved the boy's life just a few days ago. At that moment, the radio on the table chimed in again, and Boyd suddenly realized that the sign he was looking for had arrived. On Jade's side, after getting a hint from the bar owner, he decided to repair the radio in the police station to establish contact with the outside world. Fortunately, there were many old cars in the town, providing an ample supply of replacement parts. Meanwhile, Jim discovered something peculiar in their temporary residence. The wires on the lamp had only plastic insulation and no metal conductors. Even the plug was broken, but the lamp still managed to light up. As the couple marveled at the oddity, Jade suddenly burst in. He had also found the strange wiring and came seeking help to repair the radio, which needed more components. They went to the site of their past car accident, dismantling any useful items. Before leaving, Jim glanced at their trailer and recalled the question his wife had asked, feeling a chill down his spine. Subsequently, the two went to a large tree on the outskirts, as the radio needed to receive a signal with the wires placed as high as possible. Jade admitted that climbing heights made his legs weak and his head dizzy, so the task of climbing the tree fell to Jim, much to his annoyance. However, in order to leave the town, he went to the base of the tree. At home, Tabitha was also keeping herself busy. The townspeople had a rule that any unneeded or ownerless items would be gathered and stored in the town restaurant. When Tabitha brought some items to the storage warehouse, she accidentally came across a beaded bracelet. Holding it in her hand, she wore an expression of puzzlement and shock. She then took the bracelet home with her. As she pondered about it, the lights nearby began to flicker again. She questioned how the lights could be on when the wiring was empty. Tabitha decided to break open the wall to investigate the mystery. Jim was about to reach the top of the tree. Just as he was about to install the wires, Jade suddenly noticed something strange. He touched the tree trunk and, to his surprise, a large amount of blood seeped out. There was also a circular symbol nearby. He looked up and saw many bodies hanging upside down from the treetop. Jade was terrified. To make matters worse, a soldier in uniform appeared out of nowhere, brandishing a gun. Jade was so scared that he ran for his shitty life, with the soldier chasing his smell relentlessly. The soldier fired his gun during the pursuit. Jade was soon caught, and just when he thought his life was in danger, he heard Jim's voice. Jade realized that it was all just a hallucination. However, he was still terrified. He left, cursing under his breath, as he had made an even bigger discovery. Back at the town restaurant, Jade was drawing the circular pattern he had seen in the hallucination. The restaurant owner noticed the pattern and looked puzzled. Ignoring Jade's attempts to explain, she went straight to the storage room. On a shelf, there was a box of belongings left behind by the townspeople. In one of the diaries, there was a circular pattern identical to the one Jade had drawn. Jade was shocked, realizing that what he had seen was not just a simple hallucination. Feeling abandoned, Jim looked at the wires he had installed on the tree. He reluctantly turned on the walkie-talkie, which emitted a rustling sound. He tried to call for help, but there was no response. He had no choice but to take the device home. Seeing a large hole in the wall, Jim was puzzled. He learned from his son that Tabitha was in the basement, so he went downstairs out of curiosity. He saw his wife digging furiously through the dirt. After much explanation, he learned that she believed the source of power for the lights must come from somewhere. She followed the wires in the wall, discovering that the coreless wires led underground. Therefore, she decided to dig and find out what was going on. Jim thought this was ridiculous, but Tabitha countered that she had seen even more absurd things. She then pointed at the bracelet she had brought back from the restaurant. Tabitha had recognized that the handmade bracelet was the one she had lost years ago in their hometown. Jim could hardly accept this, insisting that it was just a similar design. Tabitha quickly refuted, explaining that when she made the bracelet, she accidentally broke one of the beads. The bracelet she found was undoubtedly the same one. Eventually, Jim was persuaded by his wife to join her in the search for answers. However, there was still something weighing on Tabitha's mind. After Ethan had experienced a traumatic event, he was terrified. So Tabitha went to the church to find the priest who had been the first to arrive at the scene. She wanted to confirm if the culprit Sarah was really dead. The priest's response was vague. He had seen Sarah run into the woods while chasing her. Since a night had already passed, it was likely that her survival chances in the forest were slim. Tabitha didn't press further, but instead voiced her biggest concern that if they were already dead. However, the priest only replied that we were trapped in this wretched town, suffering endlessly. How is that any different from death? It was clear that he harbored deep hatred for the town. After Tabitha left, the priest went down to the church basement alone. There he found a woman with her hands and feet tied up. It was none other than Sarah, the psychopathic murderer. It turned out she hadn't escaped the day before, but had been captured by the priest and taken to the basement. According to the town rules set by Boyd, Sarah was to be locked up in the iron shed. The reason the priest hid her was that Sarah's brother had once told him that she could hear strange voices. Desperate to leave the town, the priest believed Sarah was the only one who could find a way out of the goddamned town. After all, not everyone could receive revelations from demons. The priest even suspected that everyone in the town was experiencing a story similar to one from the Bible, only it hadn't yet ended. Sarah, startled by his words, confessed everything she had received from the demons. The demons said they had been in the town for too long, and also wanted to leave just like the residents. If Sarah did as they instructed, everyone could leave. The priest, somewhat puzzled by the demons' intentions, asked why she would so easily believe them. Sarah replied that the demons were omniscient. They had once told her 2 cars would arrive that night, and the next day, Jim's family and Jade arrived exactly in town. The demons also informed her that 2 cars had appeared in the town years ago, and everyone in them had died. Recognizing Sarah's importance, the priest urged her to produce evidence, as the townspeople might not believe her. Just then, Sarah's body began to experience intense pain. She shouted for him to bring her a pen and paper. Once he did, her hands uncontrollably scribbled on the paper. After some time, she stopped. The priest was puzzled by the pattern on the paper and asked Sarah what it meant. She told him that the demons had been watching him and saw him bury a package when he first arrived in town. This was the proof of the demons' existence. The priest seemed to remember something and went to a pile of stones outside the town where he used to meditate. It turned out that he had hidden a dark secret there. Eagerly, the priest retrieved the package, which contained a bottle of alcohol, a blood-stained piece of clothing, and another item that made the priest's face turn pale. The design on the chocolate wrapper was identical to the pattern drawn by Sarah. At this point, the priest became flustered. The town's sheriff, Boyd, had yet to grasp the true power of the demons. After burying Sarah's brother with his deputy, he shared his plan. A few days ago, he had spent a night in a trailer, proving that the amulet could indeed protect against the demons' attacks. With this in mind, he decided to take the amulet and search for an exit in the forest. The townspeople had already confirmed many times that the road could not lead them out of the town. Therefore, the exit must be hidden in the forest that everyone was afraid to enter. However, Kenny didn't agree with his plan, saying it was no different from courting death. Boyd hesitated and shared his own concerns. It turned out that Boyd's father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at his age. Recently, Boyd's hand had been shaking uncontrollably, indicating he might soon fall ill as well. Unable to protect the townspeople any longer, Boyd wanted to explore a way out while he still could. After knowing Boyd's predicament, Kenny finally understood and agreed. If Boyd met with an accident, Kenny would take over his duties and continue to protect the townspeople. The best partners went outside to play a game of baseball, as if bidding a final farewell. In contrast to the townspeople's fear and solemnity, the people in the colony house were much more at ease. By chance, Julie spotted a bunch of flowers at the door and, out of love for them, brought them to her room. Fatima teased her, asking if the flowers were sent by the demons. As night fell, everyone in the colony house was sound asleep. A man wearing glasses quietly crossed the hall, climbed the stairs, and entered the innermost room on the upper floor. With a somewhat dazed expression, he opened the curtains. A girl holding flowers stood in front of the window and asked if she could come in. It turns out the reclusive man secretly harbors feelings for a demon. Fortunately, he always manages to resist her temptations and never opens the window for her. The others, unaware of this secret, are decorating their rooms as they prepare for a banquet that night. Fatima is delighted and even brings out her long-cherished clothes for the occasion. Julie admires her optimistic attitude. She doesn't seem like someone trapped in a small town at all. Victor is still behaving as usual, searching for his favorite canned peaches in the kitchen. Donna tells him that they've run out of canned peaches, leaving Victor with a disappointed look. He says that for so many years this was the only thing that hadn't changed. Now, even that has changed, intensifying his ominous premonitions. As night falls, the man with glasses leaves a bouquet of flowers at the colony house's entrance, hoping that the demon he fancies will visit once again. It's as if he's welcoming a deadly celebration. The town's sheriff, as usual, diligently reminds the residents that it's time to return home and secure their doors and windows. When he finishes his task and returns to the police station, he's surprised to see the priest waiting at the entrance, insisting that they discuss something important. Seeing the priest's determined attitude, Boyd reluctantly abandons his plans to go home, preparing to spend the night at the police station instead. The priest is astonished when he sees the many bags on the table and asks if Boyd is planning a long journey. Boyd doesn't intend to keep his plan to explore the forest for an exit a secret, so he shares it with the priest. The priest doesn't pry further. Instead, he asks Boyd to look inside his own backpack, revealing bloody clothes that were dug up from a pit during the day. The priest recalls that before arriving in the town, a child had come to confess to him, but he didn't take it seriously and dismissed the child with a piece of chocolate. That night, the child tragically jumped to his death. The clothes belonged to the child, and the priest had been filled with regret. While standing alone on a bridge drinking, he seemed to hear God's call in a daze and drove to the mysterious town. The first thing the priest did upon arrival was to bury the child's clothes and chocolate. Boyd, puzzled, asks why he's sharing this information now. The priest explains that he's tied Sarah up in the church basement. Boyd is shocked. Previously, someone had violated the rules, and the priest had let him enter the iron shed without hesitation. So why is he making an exception for Sarah? The priest explains that Sarah can hear revelations and might be the key to finding a way out. The strongest evidence is the chocolate symbol Sarah drew. She had only been in town for 6 months and couldn't possibly know about the chocolate package the priest had buried years ago. Boyd gradually relents, questioning why, if the demons know everything, they would help everyone. The priest admits he doesn't know, but it at least shows that Sarah is special. He then proposes his plan, hoping that when Boyd explores the forest for an exit, he can bring the priest and Sarah along. Perhaps it will have unexpected effects. This leaves Boyd in a state of hesitation. At this moment, everyone in the colony house was gathered together, enjoying a lively banquet. Donna called for everyone's attention, as she had something to say. As it turned out, today marked the first anniversary of Fatima's arrival at the house. Everyone undoubtedly adored this optimistic young girl. Donna even gave her a flower wreath as a gift, which touched Fatima deeply. Another woman gave her a smelly kiss, much to the surprise of Julie, who knew that Fatima already had a boyfriend. As everyone continued to eat and drink, they didn't notice that the reclusive man with glasses had once again snuck up to the second-floor room. Expertly, he drew back the curtains, and as expected, his beloved was waiting outside the window. She told him this would be their last meeting because the feeling of seeing but not touching was awful. Blinded by love, the man finally opened the window and gently invited her into the room. After closing the window, the couple, who had always been separated by glass, began their intimacy. However, the girl soon revealed her true demonic form. After cleaning the blood from her body, she opened the window once more. The pitch-black night concealed the slow approach of several figures from the nearby forest. Unaware of the impending arrival of the terrifying demons, the people in the colony house were immersed in the joyful atmosphere. Only Boyd's son, Ellis, wasn't in high spirits. The birthday celebration reminded him of his late mother, leading to a heated argument with the others. His girlfriend, Fatima, quickly intervened and advised him to go upstairs to cool off. She then returned to the living room and noticed her friend sitting on the sofa, looking unhappy. Learning that her friend admired her jacket, Fatima didn't hesitate to take it off and give it to her. The girl was delighted and said she had something to give her in return, quickly heading to her room. At this point, Julie approached Fatima and asked about the woman who had kissed her earlier, questioning their relationship since she was dating Ellis. Fatima explained that it was just a bit of fun between her and the woman. This revelation was difficult for Julie to accept, and she hurriedly ran upstairs. Meanwhile, Victor was in his room packing up his belongings when he suddenly heard a knock at the door. To his surprise, it was Julie. She knew that only here could she escape the noisy crowd. Although Victor let her in, he had no intention of engaging in conversation, simply continuing to pack his things as if he was preparing to leave. At that moment, the girl had retrieved her beloved pillow from her room, intending to give it to Fatima. As she passed by the room of the man in glasses, she heard laughter coming from inside. Upon entering, she was surrounded by several demons wearing sinister grins, indicating her tragic fate. Meanwhile, the banquet guests had nearly finished their drinks. A burly man sitting on the stairs suddenly felt liquid dripping from above. Looking up, he saw a demon staring down at them with a malicious grin. The terrified residents scattered in all directions, only to find smiling demons at every turn. They had no choice but to flee toward the colony house's exit. Donna was leading the way and urged the escaping residents to get into their cars and head to the nearby town. Fatima realized that her boyfriend Ellis was not among them and refused to leave without him. Ellis, who had been awakened by the commotion downstairs, cautiously stepped into the hallway, only to find a trail of blood seeping from a room and his girlfriend's yellow clothing. He entered the room. To his relief, the body he found belonged to Fatima's friend, who was wearing Fatima's clothes. But soon enough, a demon with a pig smile entered the room. Ellis quickly broke the window and made his way to the second-floor balcony. As the demon was about to catch up, he mustered the courage to jump down. Fatima saw this scene and rushed to help her boyfriend stand up. By this time, Donna had already driven away. The couple had no choice but to return to the colony house, closing and locking the front door tightly. They also closed the inner door and pressed firmly against the protective talisman on it, hoping that the demons wouldn't break through. As it turned out, they had done the right thing. The sound of the demons pounding on the door came from outside, but the couple would not be fooled. They had narrowly escaped danger. Victor in the attic heard screams coming from outside and realized that the demons had arrived. Fortunately, he was prepared and had secured a rope to the roof beam. He let Julie climb down the rope first, and he followed closely behind with a metal box. Julie suggested they should head back to the town, but after seeing a young boy in the woods, Victor hesitated for a moment before insisting they run into the forest. With no better choice, Julie could only follow his lead. Soon, Victor and Julie arrived at the base of a large tree that he and Ethan had visited before. He told Julie to hide inside the tree's hollow. Strangely, as she jumped into the tree hollow, Julie found herself in a basement with stone walls all around, leaving her unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, in the town, Boyd and the priest were still discussing Sarah's issue when they suddenly heard a car honking outside. They rushed out to find Donna leading the survivors from the colony house. Trailing behind them were the slowly approaching demons. Once everyone had entered the police station, the priest heard someone calling his name. Seeing this, Boyd opened fire and helped the priest into a room. The priest's neck was bleeding profusely, and now he could only emit some weak chicken sounds. Boyd knew that the priest was beyond saving, so he held him in his arms and prayed with Donna until the priest drew his last breath to meet Jesus. On the other hand, Jim and his family were unaware of the tragedy unfolding at the colony house. He was working on a signal receiver, hoping to connect it to a walkie-talkie and contact the outside world. Tabitha was very relieved, although they could not be certain that this method would work. At least everyone was making an effort. Moreover, her plan to dig a hole was still underway. Following the mysterious electrical wires, she had already excavated a hole nearly 2 meters deep. When Jim asked her when it would end, Tabitha replied that as long as they kept digging, they would eventually uncover the truth. After the demons' attack, only a few managed to survive and sought refuge in the local police station, where they spent a terrifying night. Kenny arranged for the survivors to stay temporarily in the homes of other townspeople. News of the horrifying events spread quickly, and everyone became panic-stricken. Kenny suggested that Boyd should make a speech to calm everyone down, but Boyd refused. He believed it was time for Kenny to step up and handle the situation while he had more important matters to attend to. Boyd soon found himself in the church's basement, where he discovered a frightened and surprised Sarah. He led her into the woods, and she was puzzled and asked why he brought her here and where the priest was. Boyd told her that the priest had been killed the night before. Sarah was heartbroken upon hearing that. Boyd, however, was not so kind to her. If it wasn't for the priest's insistence that she had some connection with the demons, he wouldn't have taken her into the woods to find a way out. The two soon arrived at a small cabin where Boyd told Sarah to wait while he returned to town for necessary supplies. Sarah assured him she wouldn't run away. In fact, everything she had done before was to help everyone escape the town. This reminded Boyd of his own arrival in the town after he had just retired from the military. He had planned a road trip with his family, only to find their way blocked by a huge tree, just like what happened to Jim's family. They mysteriously ended up in the eerie town, which wasn't as peaceful as it is now. The kind-hearted priest stopped Boyd's car and told everyone that darkness was approaching and that they needed to hide quickly. Boyd and his wife initially didn't want to listen, but when they heard a terrifying roar, they panicked and followed the priest into a basement. At that time, there were no protective talismans, so the townspeople had to hide all over the place at night, hoping the demons wouldn't find them. Terrifying screams echoed from time to time, and everyone was too scared to breathe. When daylight finally arrived, the man emerged from the basement to find corpses scattered everywhere. Other lucky survivors also came out of their hiding spots, and Boyd and his wife looked shocked. They were curious about what kind of place this town was. The priest, however, was filled with sorrow. Afterward, Boyd knew that this couldn't go on. The first step was to gather everyone together and look out for one another. He, the priest, and Donna took the lead in gathering the survivors, storing useful supplies in a restaurant, and implementing a unified distribution system. They also planned areas for spending the night, with people taking turns on guard duty, ensuring that everyone had their basic survival needs met for the time being. Boyd soon found the priest and realized that the small town needed to become self-sufficient. He prepared to explore the woods, as otherwise, everyone would eventually starve. His exploration turned out to be a success, as he found goats, chickens, and ducks in the forest. Although the priest found it unbelievable, Boyd decided to set up a farm to secure a stable food supply. Boyd's son, Ellis, noticed that his mother had become nervous ever since they arrived in the town. She would occasionally stand by the road, lost in thought, mumbling about how her experiences were similar to a dream she once had. Ellis sensed something was wrong and urged his father to stop exploring the woods and spend more time with his mother. However, Boyd was preoccupied with the animals he'd found in the forest and believed that his wife wouldn't be so fragile. Ignoring his son's advice, Boyd ventured back into the woods. Unexpectedly, Boyd encountered a wolf dog appearing silently in front of him. When he decided to take the dog back to town, the animal suddenly turned and ran away. Boyd chased after it without hesitation. He reached a deeper part of the forest where the wolf dog vanished. Boyd then realized he had lost his way. He wandered around anxiously as darkness fell and terrifying howls echoed in the distance. Frazzled, Boyd raised his gun and cautiously scanned his surroundings. He fell into a cave where he saw a demon slowly approaching from outside. Terrified, Boyd stared wide-eyed, but the demon didn't enter the cave. After a moment, it slowly retreated. Boyd wondered why the demon didn't come in, and noticed that the cave walls were adorned with stones covered in runes. He guessed that these stones were preventing the demons from entering. As daylight broke, Boyd wrapped the talisman stones in his clothes, ready to take them back to town. On his way back, he suddenly heard gunshots and hurried towards the town. To his surprise, it was his wife who was firing the gun. She seemed possessed, shooting at innocent passers-by. Boyd shouted for her to stop, but she mumbled that it was all just a dream, and the only way to go home was to wake everyone up. She must have been under mental pressure, and her husband's absence the previous night had likely contributed to her mental breakdown. It took Boyd quite some time to persuade her to put the gun down. But suddenly their son Ellis appeared, and the wife aimed the gun at him. Without hesitation, Boyd pulled the trigger on his wife. This was probably the reason why Ellis had been giving his father the cold shoulder ever since. When Boyd returned to the town's restaurant, he saw many residents causing a commotion at the entrance. It turned out that they were worried that people from the colony house would come and steal food, so they were preparing to take what belonged to them first. Fortunately, Boyd's authority was highly respected, and with just a few words, he was able to persuade the crowd to disperse. However, he knew that this wouldn't completely eliminate everyone's panic. So he found Kenny and told him that he would go to the forest in a few days, but first he needed to find a way to calm the residents. Kenny felt that calming the residents' emotions was just a temporary solution. They had to find a way out as soon as possible. He then told Boyd that he could go to the forest with peace of mind and that he could handle the townspeople's affairs. This made Boyd finally proceed without worries. Before setting off, Boyd had one more thing to do. Ellis and his girlfriend had narrowly escaped danger the night before thanks to the talisman stones. However, the boy was still injured and was currently being treated at the hospital. Boyd suddenly appeared at his son's bedside. Ever since his mother passed away, Ellis had been giving his father the cold shoulder. Boyd didn't know if he would be able to return alive from the forest this time, and he wanted his son to know that he had always loved him. But Ellis still appeared indifferent, and Boyd left the room, wiping away his tears. At the door, he happened to meet Donna, who hugged Boyd as a farewell gesture. In the room, Fatima walked over to Ellis and tried to console him. She said that although his father had made some mistakes, the suffering he had endured over the years was no less than Ellis's. Back at the police station, Boyd put away his uniform and badge. Thinking that his son still wouldn't forgive him, he felt heartbroken. When he arrived at the forest with his luggage, he didn't expect Ellis to follow him. He had come to say goodbye to his father. At that moment, Ellis finally realized that he couldn't blame his father for his mother's death. If he didn't say goodbye, it might become a lifelong regret. His heartfelt words finally mended the rift between father and son. After finally convincing Ellis to return, Boyd called Sarah out of the cabin. The two of them walked deeper into the forest. It was uncertain whether they would find the way back on this journey. In the small town, many people were also making efforts to return home. Julie was telling her parents about her strange experience the night before. After being pushed into the tree hole by Victor, she found herself in the town's basement the next second. Her parents were puzzled by this, but only her brother Ethan knew that the tree could randomly teleport people to different places. They were aware that Victor, who knew many secrets, must have gone somewhere else, and they should find him as soon as possible. Another person who had the same idea was Jade. He had accidentally seen the strange symbols and a younger Victor in a booklet earlier, and rushed over to ask Julie about Victor's whereabouts. However, Jim didn't want his daughter to relive the painful experience from the night before, and quickly pulled Jade outside. Jade shared his discovery, which only made Jim angrier. Last time, Jade had tricked him into the forest to set up an antenna, only to leave without a word. Now he wondered what was going on. Jim told Jade that the radio had actually worked, but the signal was too weak for conversation. They should place the antenna higher up. As a result, the two went to the colony house, where Donna was cleaning up the dead bodies scattered all over the floor. Jim proposed his idea, saying that the colony house was situated at the top of the highest peak, and if they could set up the antenna on the roof, the signal would be the strongest. Donna agreed. She then found Kenny and gathered all the residents together, telling them that many people were looking for a way to escape the town, and now it was time for everyone to contribute. This gave everyone new hope, and the fear caused by the demons also dissipated. The residents could be seen carrying various parts needed to build the antenna, heading towards the colony house. On Boyd's way to the forest was eerily quiet, with only their footsteps heard. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any danger. Just before evening, they arrived at a stone-built house. Boyd was familiar with the place because it was here that he had accidentally discovered the sacred stone, and it was the furthest point he had ever reached in the past. He decided to rest here for the night and embark on their adventure the next day. Sarah asked Boyd to unlock her handcuffs, stating that it was inconvenient even to use the restroom. However, her request was denied for safety reasons. The next day, Boyd and Sarah continued deeper into the jungle. They would make markings on trees to avoid getting lost in the forest. However, Sarah's main concern wasn't getting lost. She was afraid they might end up back where they started, like going in circles on the road. Boyd didn't provide an answer, but instead asked her why she believed the demon's words that killing Ethan would allow them to leave the town. Sarah said that everything the demons had told her had come true. They said 2 cars would arrive in the town, and then Jim's family and Jade appeared. The demons also said that if she didn't kill the little boy, Sarah's brother would die, followed by everyone in the town. The first 2 events had already happened, leaving only the last one. After listening to her, Boyd finally understood the girl's helplessness and unlocked her handcuffs. Boyd believed that there would be a time when all questions would be answered, so he pressed on even more diligently. Before long, the two heard a crisp sound coming from ahead. Following the source of the noise, they discovered many glass bottles hanging from a large tree, which produced the sound as they swayed and collided. Sarah was puzzled, as it was said that no one had ever ventured this far. Boyd looked carefully and found that there seemed to be something inside the glass bottles. Just as he was about to take one down, Sarah suddenly covered her ears in pain, screaming that they were talking to her again. Then she collapsed to the ground and started convulsing. The other people in the town were also making efforts to escape. They had placed their hopes in a plan to build a radio tower to contact the outside world. However, this was no small task, and despite working all day, they hadn't finished. When they returned to their living quarters, exhausted, some began to doubt if the tower would be useful at all. The next morning, Donna was awakened by a scream. A resident had committed suicide, overwhelmed by the pressure, possibly related to the radio tower. In fact, many people in the colony house had the same concern. Fatima, who was connecting wires, thought that even if the signal tower managed to contact the outside world, how would they leave? And even if they did return home, would they still be the same people? However, Jim hadn't thought that far. He was immersed in the task, and with the radio tower nearing completion, he mentioned that they only needed more wood for support. Donna happened to pass by. Upon hearing the request, her accumulated unease erupted. She stormed into the colony house's kitchen and began chopping up the wooden floor in frustration, shouting that everyone's leaving anyway, so this colony house is useless. Exhausted from chopping, Donna then headed to the town's bar. Kenny had noticed Donna's poor mood and followed her there. He thought she was upset about the person who took his own life the day before, but that wasn't the case. Her worry was that everyone now had their hopes set on going home. But what if the radio tower failed? It would plunge many into despair. Kenny didn't know how to respond to her. However, Donna was sensible. After venting her frustrations, she knew it was impossible to halt the radio tower plan now and would still do her best to help. Jim encountered another problem. He couldn't find the power source needed for the walkie-talkie. He and Jade had removed all the car batteries they could find, but many were already drained. Even when combined, they couldn't power the walkie-talkie for long. Jade was frustrated and kept saying how great it would be if they could find the mysterious man Victor, as he was convinced Victor was the key to leaving the town. Jim couldn't help but feel disdain, thinking this was a clear attempt to avoid the problem at hand. After hearing this, Jade left in anger. Left on his own, Jim couldn't come up with a good solution. Ellis told him that the wires connecting the radio tower were ready. Jade was still preoccupied with finding a power source. He complained to the restaurant owner, who became increasingly annoyed. She fiddled with a few switches, and surprisingly, this action gave Jade a great insight, though he didn't reveal what it was. On Tabitha's side, she was also quite persistent, continuing to dig holes day and night. She wanted to see where the strange wires came from. After finishing her work for the day and preparing to leave the basement, she suddenly heard a strange noise. Thinking it was her son making noise, she called out to him, but there was no response. Tabitha felt something was wrong and hurried upstairs, only to see her husband hanging upside down from the ceiling. It turned out to be just a dream, but it seemed to hint that the hole she was digging wasn't so simple. That afternoon, a disheartened Jim returned home to find his family working hard digging the hole, so he decided to join in the digging effort. As the sky darkened, Tabitha suddenly noticed something unusual. Beneath the sand, there was an incredibly hard object. At the same time, deep in the forest, Boyd was tending to Sarah, who lay unconscious in their makeshift tent. Suddenly, she awoke as if from a nightmare, her eyes drawn to an object in Boyd's hand. He explained that it was the bottle they had found earlier in the day. Upon removing a note from inside, they discovered it bore the year 1864. Similar notes were found in the other bottles as well. Sarah insisted that they should return immediately, explaining that she had heard an ominous voice earlier, warning them that they shouldn't be there and that something more terrifying than a demon lurked outside. As Boyd pondered this, a noise emanated from nearby, followed by the tent beginning to shake. But both he and Sarah were too afraid to venture outside. Fortunately, the shaking ceased after a short while. Boyd hurriedly retrieved a fallen talisman and hung it up. However, a loud explosion followed, and bright lights flashed into the tent, illuminating it like daylight. The pair were terrified and dared not go outside to investigate. They sat there, dumbfounded, until daybreak. As Boyd stepped out of the tent, he was stunned by the sight that the area was covered in dense spider webs. Though they couldn't make sense of it, Boyd insisted on heading towards the source of the light from the night before. Sarah tried to persuade him to turn back, reminding him of the warning from the voice. Boyd felt helpless. They didn't know what had dragged them there or how to return. Besides, the beam of light seemed to come from a searchlight, so they might encounter other people if they reached it. Sarah remained uneasy, wondering if Boyd's wife was trying to send a message to warn him. As soon as she said this, they heard a cry for help in the distance. They rushed to investigate and arrived at a large tree where they found a woman entwined within. Boyd recognized her as his deceased wife. As he started to approach, he disturbed spiders hiding in the ground. Several of them crawled onto him, and Sarah hurried to help remove them. Boyd then realized that what he saw was just an illusion. After they finally escaped the web-infested area, Boyd became increasingly agitated. He hadn't found any clues from the outside world, and his health was deteriorating, probably due to the after effects of a spider bite. The hallucinations were likely induced by neurotoxins. Boyd grew desperate, feeling the mission was doomed to fail. Sarah encouraged him, asking if he didn't want to reunite with his son. Her words calmed him, and he struggled to his feet, gazing up at the sky. A storm was brewing. In the small town, the residents were working tirelessly to build a signal transmission tower in hopes of escaping their isolated existence. However, they had no power supply. In this eerie town, the electrical wires in everyday appliances weren't real and could operate without being plugged in. But Jade had an idea inspired by a lamp. He ran to Jim's house to share his thoughts. Jade demonstrated that the lamp could light up without being plugged in, which suggested that its base had a power source. He reasoned that this power could also be used for other appliances. To prove his point, he connected a hairdryer he found in an outsider's car to the lamp's base. As the light bulb lit up, the hairdryer also powered on. Jim realized that if they could find more lamps, they could supply enough electricity to the radio tower. Jade called upon the townspeople to search for more lamps and electrical wires. Since the wires within the town were hollow and useless, they had to dismantle wires from outsiders' vehicles. With the hope of returning home within reach, everyone eagerly contributed to the radio tower project. The town's doctor knew of an abandoned camper with electrical wires and quickly went to dismantle them. Kenny was full of energy and began daydreaming about life after leaving the town. He expressed his desire to travel the world with the doctor, which was actually a subtle confession of his feelings. However, when the doctor revealed that she was already engaged before entering the town, the heartbroken Kenny made up an excuse and left in a hurry. Meanwhile, the people in the colony house were busy connecting all the usable lamp bases with electrical wires. Jim was also preparing for the final stages of the project. The wooden radio tower had been constructed, but it needed to be installed on the roof. They had to use the limited resources to create a pulley system that hoisted the tower onto the roof. The walkie-talkie was now fully wired, and Jim explained to his son that each coil on it represented a different frequency for channel switching. Jade was proactive and approached the restaurant owner, wanting to get some food for everyone. He saw her paying tribute to her deceased husband and learned that her greatest sorrow would be leaving her husband behind in the town. Instead of being noisy, Jade comforted her using words but not muscles, saying that her loved one would always be with her no matter where she went. His words moved her, and she invited Jade to join her in the memorial ritual. He then received 2 large baskets of food and distributed them to the hard-working townspeople. Although many had tried to leave before, this time felt different. The doctor sought out Kenny, who was nursing his wounded heart alone. Feeling a bit guilty for her previous rejection, she admitted to being torn between wanting to see her fiancé and traveling the world with Kenny. He was lit up with joy. They joined the others outside the colony house, excitedly watching the roof as the tower was about to be completed. Even Tabitha, who had been digging holes at home, came to witness the momentous event. Under Jade's command, several strong men carefully moved the tower body. It finally stood at the highest point of the town. Jim directed everyone to turn on the power switch. As the countdown reached 0, Jim tested the signal frequency, and it was normal. They had succeeded, which meant that the town could contact the outside world. After congratulating her husband, Tabitha returned home and continued her hole-digging project. However, their celebration didn't last long, as a large mass of dark clouds was approaching from afar, signaling a storm. Those under the clouds were even more unfortunate. Boyd had been bitten by a spider and could barely walk. Hearing the booming sound from the night before, they knew they were heading in the right direction. Boyd found the strength to keep going. As torrential rain began to fall, the two people pressed on, undeterred. It wasn't raining in the town yet. Jim was adjusting the channels, trying to make contact with the outside world. But despite trying for a long time, no one responded. Seeing the storm approaching, Donna urged everyone to get inside. Jim didn't want to give up, as the tower could be destroyed by the strong winds. This might be their last chance. Donna understood this, and after calling the children back inside, she went to help Jim. The heavy rain soon started to fall. Just as Jim cursed and was about to pack up the equipment, a voice came through the walkie-talkie. To Jim's surprise, the person on the other end knew his name and warned him that his wife shouldn't dig that hole. Afterwards, all the lamp bases burned out. Alarmed, Jim rushed home, fearing that his wife was in danger. As it turned out, Tabitha had been digging in the basement, trying to find the source of the power line. She had made progress yesterday, reaching a depth of over 2 meters, but she couldn't dig any further because there seemed to be a hard object blocking the way down. She went to the town's storeroom and found a pickaxe. But as soon as she made a hole in the basement, the entire bottom of the pit collapsed. Tabitha had nowhere to hide and fell in with it. Fortunately, it wasn't too deep, and Tabitha wasn't seriously injured. She had also solved a mystery. The power line in the wall stopped here. Suddenly, the mysterious man Victor appeared from the depths of the hole. He hadn't been seen since the colony house was attacked by the demons. He said that the boy in white had foreseen Tabitha coming here and arranged for him to meet her. This place was where the demons slept, and it was best to leave as soon as possible. Tabitha looked incredulously at the pattern on the wall. Suddenly, the hole collapsed again. Victor quickly led Tabitha deeper into the hole. When Jim returned home, all he saw was a bottomless pit. At this point, Boyd and Sarah were struggling to move in the pouring rain. He told Sarah to hurry up and not to worry about him. Suddenly, a little boy in white appeared and pointed to a tree hollow. Sarah understood and urgently pulled Boyd to the tree, urging him to crawl inside. However, in the next moment, Boyd found himself in a pit surrounded by walls. The scene shifted, and a radio in the restaurant suddenly began to play a song on its own. Outside the window, a bus slowly came to a stop, possibly indicating that more people were brought to the town. And here ends Season 1 of this drama.